But Mr. Aslan, if I may push you on that point, when we talk about the BDS movement, Jewish Voice for Peace, again, is made up of a significant number of Jews. And as Ms. Kar Mustafa there cited earlier, there are studies which show that Jews abroad, outside of Israel, are feeling disconnected from Israel, some of them, that is. Isn't that showing that there is something wrong within Israel?
It shows that propaganda has an effect. It shows that after 2,000 years of homelessness, a lot of people have post-traumatic stress disorder and are willing to do anything to feel safe. And it's the same, don't laugh when I'm talking, and it's the same equivalent of some black people at the end of slavery, or even with segregation. Some people at the end of slavery and the end of segregation were also shamefully in favor of slavery. Black people had slaves, and some of them were opposing desegregation. People who have suffered tend sometimes to take positions that perpetuate the suffering. Jewish Voice for Peace doesn't represent Jews, it's not their voice, and they're certainly not in favor of peace. They are a fig leaf to spin what is an anti-Israel campaign based on lies and distortions of international law, which is BDS, as something that's based on human rights, which it demonstrably isn't. And Ms. Mustafa did the same shameful thing, justifying anti-Israel hatred by pointing to a few Jews who want to fit into their societies, who are tired of hearing propaganda against Israel. I could do the same thing with any group. Okay, you can find people who will justify persecution in any group. If I did that, I would be a bad person. And I think it's terrible that you are referring to fig leaf groups to justify what the vast majority of Jews oppose.
Okay, Ms. Kar Mustafa, how do you feel about the BDS
movement? Can I have a word now? I have to say, I did laugh, especially when Mr. Aslan actually said that I milked the emotion when Mr. Aslan brings in 2,000 years of history. Zionism is a recent movement that is made up of Jewish supremacists who are expansionists and colonialists. They have come from Eastern Europe and they have stolen Palestinian land, and they have done that through ethnic. I did not interrupt you, so you do not interrupt me. You're free to laugh if you want, because I found what you said very laughable, but do not interrupt me. And so Zionism is a Jewish supremacist ideology that was created in Eastern Europe and made up of colonialist supremacists who went into Palestine and invaded the land that wasn't theirs and actually committed ethnic cleansing. So the idea of bringing in emotion and bringing in 2,000 years of history and comparing black slavery to a group that is made of supremacists who oppress the population of Palestine for the best part of 70 years is utterly shameful, but again, not surprising. Now how many groups are fig leaf groups? You have the Naturai Kata, you have the Jews for Peace, you have countless groups made up of Jews who are actually sickened to the death by what Israel is doing and what by people are saying that it is done in the name of the Jewish faith. I think the whole of the world is waking up to the atrocities committed by Israel, and first and foremost, thankfully, it is the Jews who are becoming aware of the atrocities that are committed in their names. They are not fig leaf groups. They are very representative of Jewish groups across the world. And the proof again is in the pudding when the statistics from incredibly neutral opinion pollsters are showing that there is an absolute disgust with Israeli policy, first and foremost amongst Jewish people.
Mr. Aslan, as far as being aware, I wanted to ask you about this recent statement that a joint list MK, Mr. Ahmed Tibi, made. He's accused the current Israeli administration of being so extreme that, in his words, quote, Netanyahu is the moderate, end quote. Netanyahu himself, in the run-up to his re-election, very clearly said that he would never allow for an independent Palestinian state under his rule. So when you talk about peace, how are we to come to terms with that?
So first of all, I want to respond to the absolutely ridiculous, infantile and cartoonish fairy tale that Ms. Mustafa just repeated over and over again. And if somebody were to repeat that to anybody for 30 years, they'll start to believe it. But it's absolute nonsense, okay? Now, fortunately or unfortunately for her, Chief Rabbi Mustafa, who's decided what Judaism and Zionism means, is in bad company, because I'm not an Eastern European Jew. My parents are refugees from an Arab country, and they've always been Zionists, and so have been their ancestors since the dawn of Judaism. The first lines in the Bible that Jews believed 3,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago was to Abraham to go to Zion. Now, I'm not a religious person, but that corresponds to also 3,000 years of history. So to say that Zionism has been invented in Eastern Europe script is just very convenient. Also, I find it despicable to sort the good Jews and the bad Jews. The good Jews are the Jews who agree with her. The bad Jews are all the other Jews who actually want to be equal to everybody else and claim a little bit of space in their ancient homeland in the Middle East. Now, regarding peace, again, the Palestinians have been offered peace 3 times. They've rejected statehood, them and Arab leaders, 6 or 7 times in history. There is no other example of this in human history. If you want the Palestinians to come to the table and Israel to afford them a state, which it has offered them many times, Israelis must feel like they're not committing suicide. There's no international law anywhere that requires that a state commit suicide. The Palestinians need to realize they need to make a compromise. They're going to have to live side by side with Israel, even if it hurts, even if it doesn't please them, even if they've been taught a narrative that is false, like Miss Mustafa's. And I know this because I've taught this class at university, okay? I am a researcher and an expert on this, and actually my research tries to promote peace between the sides, not just to inflame tensions. But as long as you have this narrative that's giving moral cover to terrorism and making some reporters sound interesting to themselves on TV and is demonizing one side, it doesn't matter what the politicians say because nothing's going to get better.
Mr. Aslan, I'm sorry, but I want to push you on this because Netanyahu, again, clearly said that he would not allow for an independent Palestinian state under his rule. Certainly that is not conducive for peace.
The Palestinian Authority has similarly said that it would never recognize Israel's Jewish state and all kinds of other things. Mr. Netanyahu, I am not his representative, has said all kinds of things that go in every direction. He's a politician and he's trying to please everybody. The Israeli people and the Israeli governments in the past have consistently offered 100% or near 100% of all the land the Palestinians requested, and all kinds of other measures, including symbolic measures for the right of return that doesn't really exist in international law and things of that kind. There is an article right now tracking all the polls of Palestinians throughout history. Because of this narrative that is being peddled, like in your introduction, like the images you're showing now.
Mr. Aslan, I do apologize for interrupting. We just have 2 minutes left. I do apologize for cutting into your words there. I just wanted to get both of your final words, if I may. Ms. Kara Mustafa, go ahead with your comments on what's being said.
I've clearly rattled Mr. Assalin's cage, obviously, because he seems to be very upset with what I've said, even though I've stated facts. I mean, Theodor Herzl is Hungarian. I'm sure he's not from any Arab country. And I'm sure Mr. Assalin would recognize that his parents weren't called Yupa in any other country, but in European countries, whereby they actually received protection in the Middle East, in Iran, and in Turkey, when their European counterpart were being persecuted by Westerners. But just the last point about the string of allegations about how the PLO said that it doesn't recognize Israel. Do not interrupt me. I was gracious. I did not interrupt your inanity, so please, come on.
No, you weren't.
And Palestine, the PLO actually removed the statement from its charter in 1988. And Yasser Arafat repeatedly recognized. And the Arab League actually offered a full recognition of Israel in 2002. And that was consistently, absolutely rejected by Israel. Why? Because Israel wants, as Mr. Assalin mentions, he states Judea and Samaria, which is the entire region under Jewish supremacist law, and with complete disregard of Palestinian rights, where Palestinians are Untermensch, and whereby the entire region becomes under Israeli authority. I think we've seen it just today, just this week, when Benjamin Netanyahu has requested that even the Golan Heights become recognized as Israeli. I think it very much reveals the expansionist nature of Israel and confirms pretty much that whatever I've said, regardless of how infantile it may seem to Mr. Assalin,
I do apologize
is
for having to cut in. I do apologize.
You.
We'll have to continue this conversation at a later date. I do apologize to both of you for running out of time there. That was Middle East expert and journalist Ms. Hafsa Kara Mustafa, who was joining us live from London. And we were also joined by international relations expert Mr. Philippe Assaline, who was speaking to us live from Los Angeles. And of course, viewers, we do appreciate you joining us for this edition of The Debate. Until next time, good night.